Such a pleasure to be with you to lead this webinar whose objective is to give you an update on the Marfrig Verdemize program, an initiative launched in August last year in a partnership with IDH from the Netherlands to fight deforestation in the beef supply chain. With the launch of that program, Marfrig, one of the largest animal protein producers in the world, committed to invest 500 million reals in the next 10 years to make sure that its supply chain is sustainable and free of deforestation. The target is to achieve 100% of animals traced by 2025, from the calf to the finishing of the animal. Is this a complex operation? For sure. First, because of practical reasons. Brazil has today about 214 million head of cattle, spread in millions of hectares and farms with different cow operations and finishing operations. Second, because of image. When we talk about deforestation, one of the first things that comes to mind is the cattle grazing in a very large and sunny area where there was a forest in the past. And that image associated to deforestation and fires in the Amazon region in the Cerrados have marred the image Brazil has overseas. The current uncontrolled deforestation puts Brazil in the spotlight, but also Brazilian beef exports. It's impossible to speak about fighting deforestation without dealing with this complex and important supply chain in Brazilian agribusiness. Most of the animal protein sector already has traceability policies. Knowing where animals come from is vital to any company. But monitoring is limited to the so-called direct suppliers. That is, the cattle raisers that sell the fat cattle ready to be slaughtered. So the main bottleneck is the indirect supply. The farms where the calves are, which are the initial operations before going to the fattening operations. And in that link of the supply chain that Marfrig Verdemize started acting through that program, bridging the gap in monitoring our suppliers. Marfrig said when it announced the Verdemize program, it is challenging, but somebody had to do it. We meet here today to learn about what's being done, to understand from the standpoint of the government, animal producers, as programs such as Verdemize can contribute to change the landscape, its evolution in the past few months, and also the challenges that lie ahead. We have here in this seminar Miguel Goulart, the CEO of Marfrig, Mauro Mendes, the governor of the state of Mato Grosso, Pedro de Camargo Neto, engineer and producer and former president of the Brazilian Rural Society, Fernando Sampaio, executive director of the PCI Institute, Produce, Conserve and Include, Fernando Macetelli Benes, zootechnist, animal husbandry expert, also a farmer, Gonçalo Munoz, a Chilean businessman and one of the leaders in the UN representatives, a high-level climate action champion, Paulo Pianez, Sustainability and Communications Director, and Marcos Molina, the chairman of the board at Marfrig. I'd like to remind you that we won't have the Q&A session at the end due to time restrictions, but questions can be asked using the chat, and the answers will be available on the Marfrig website right after this meeting. Thank you all very much. I turn it over to Miguel. Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be with you in such an important event to Marfrig. During this meeting, we will present the advances in the Marfrig Verdemize program. This program has clear targets in order to preserve biodiversity in Brazil, especially the Amazon and the Cerrados biomes. In this webinar, we will have guests who will talk about different perspectives of cattle production in Brazil and how to reconcile production and conservation. As the state of Mato Grosso has been with Marfrig since Verdemize was created and was also responsible for implementing public policies of preserving, conserving and including, I turn it over to the governor of the state, Mr. Mauro Mendes. I'm sorry, I was on mute. I was telling you that Governor Mauro Mendes is participating in an emergency meeting. He will join us shortly. So I turn it over to Pedro de Camargo Neto. Pedro, give us a context of cattle production in Brazil to see how the sector has evolved towards sustainability and the end of illegal deforestation. Let me ask you, in Brazil, as a market, is there the willingness for Brazil to become a relevant player in the low carbon market? Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I was going to speak right after the governor, and to me, it would be a pleasure because I would start by praising the state of Mato Grosso that has made significant efforts to curb deforestation. If we analyze the index announced late last year, deforestation in the legal Amazon in 2019-2020 was estimated at a very high level with a 9.5% increase. The state of Mato Grosso had a 4% increase. So Mato Grosso has done its homework, and I believe that as we hear the next index for 2020 and 2021 with direct activities, we will be able to reduce even further that deforestation in Mato Grosso. At least Mato Grosso is doing its part. There are large areas in Mato Grosso that are federal areas. We have reserves, federal areas that is up to the federal government to inspect. And that's where the biggest problem lies for Brazil to gain credibility, and also the credibility of producing soybeans and cattle. So it's a significant problem we have. For as long as we have unchecked deforestation, as the indices show, credibility in Brazil will be reduced, and so will the credibility of the cattle production. These deforestations are illegal. Basically, logging operations, mining, the illegal settlement of public areas. But as we ruin the credibility of the country as farmers, we end up footing the bill. I've followed Marfrig's effort for some time, and I see them trying to organize the supply chain, and that's very important. I think Marfrig is doing the right thing. They are making this effort far from being trivial. It's a very important effort, and that will be helpful. And this was a top-down pressure from importers, from supermarkets in Europe, putting pressure on the supply chain. We controlled direct suppliers, it wasn't enough, and now Marfrig is heading towards controlling indirect suppliers. I commend Marfrig for national cattle production. This is still insufficient. I don't want just to see Marfrig getting organized, or just Marfrig's suppliers or Marfrig's customers receiving sustainable beef. I need to see the whole country doing the same. So as leaders in this sector, we have to go beyond Marfrig, working bottom up. If we do not face land use problems, In the beginning, we fought everything. And these are problems that date back from the last century. Land use irregularities allowing criminals today to operate more freely. We have to control that. We have to have a bottom-up approach. Obviously, a top-down approach is good but not enough. As the cattle production sector, we have to work bottom-up, being sure that the animals being produced are being legally produced, because phytosanitary attributes were already achieved. What we lack are environmental and land problems. And Marfrig's effort is here to help us. But as I said, it's insufficient. And this is pressure being made by supermarkets, and as cattle raisers, we have to work on the complete supply chain. We have to report irregularities, making it sure that what is illegal. That has nothing to do with us, farmers and cattle raisers. We have to put pressure on the governments. The government of Mato Grosso, it's doing its homework, but not other states. And the federal government that has done little. You see that deforestation went up despite having the army working in the region. Today, we know exactly what happens in the Amazon region through satellite images on a per hectare basis. So there are no excuses. We know what is happening, and we are not doing enough to put an end with the criminality and illegality in Brazil. And producers shouldn't foot the bill for what is not for them to pay. So congratulations to Mato Grosso, but there is yet a lot to be done in the Amazon region. Thank you very much. Thank you, Pedro. I'd like to turn it over to Fernando Sampaio, who will speak about the strategy created in Mato Grosso called PCI, that led to the creation of the PCI Institute. So, Fernando, share with us what strategy is all about and the commonalities between what is done at PCI with the Marfrig Verdemize program. Piggybacking on what Pedro said, how can PCI help leverage the scale of that movement, that sustainability movement in the state? I would like to thank you. I'd like to thank Marfrig as well. So PCI is an initiative in Mato Grosso to promote sustainable development based on the efficient land use. We are not just talking about sustainable cattle production or sustainable soybeans, but a sustainable territory. How can the state of Mato Grosso becoming sustainable? How do we do that? PCI was devised collectively in an effort bringing together the government, farmers, the civil society, establishing long-term targets, balancing those three elements: produce, conserve, and include. Mato Grosso can produce more to meet the domestic and international demand. We can conserve what needs to be conserved, despite the recent occupation of the territory. Over 60% of Mato Grosso still has native vegetation. And at the same time, we can include small holders in that development process. So PCI started with this long-term vision. We know where we're going to get to, but nobody can do it by themselves. Neither the government, nor the companies, or even producers. We have to harness all the efforts So we need everybody working on those activities that need to be implemented in order to achieve a sustainable status. On the government side, we have a leader like Governor Mauro Mendes who understood that message, and he put deforestation control at the top of his political policies. The government invested a lot to improve efficiency in controlling illegal deforestation with international partnerships, and that has yielded results, as Pedro mentioned. Mato Grosso, in the past 6 months, has managed to achieve a 30% reduction in deforestation. We had the creation of the Mato Grosso Beef Institute. We have an agreement with the Public Prosecutor's Office to re-include previously illegal producers, how to bring them back to a regular supply chain. We also provide technical assistance to producers. So the state government has made headway in this agenda that has to do with PCI. On the other hand, the private sector has followed suit. There is no point just having companies who want sustainable products, be them beef or soybeans, having their arms crossed, just waiting for that sustainable product to come along. What we're saying is that we need companies to roll up their sleeves and help the state with those activities. And that's exactly what Marfrig is doing. We will support those producers to have regular operations. We will support them to increase their productivity. And by doing that, by bringing together what the government, companies, and civil society are doing, we will manage to make progress in those targets and the commitment made by the state of Mato Grosso, the one we presented in Paris in 2015. And we need lots of investment to make it happen. All of them requires money, technical assistance, the recovery of degraded pastures. So we are there to attract partnerships and investments to Mato Grosso. Mato Grosso has a partnership with IDH, a Dutch initiative to foster sustainable operations. They supported Marfrig in the development of Verdemize. IDH also launched a fund called N Green that makes impactful investments. They also captured funds from resources from those from that fund. It works with Mato Grosso because Mato Grosso has that sustainability commitment. The fund requires that commitment. We have investments from the governments of Germany and the UK supporting producers in the environmental. The Secretary of the Environment investments for green jobs. So the state has been able to attract partnerships and investments that are helping both the government and the companies to move forward. So PCI is an ecosystem of public-private activities and investments, and we are taking another step with the state government to create the PCI Institute to be a catalyst, an institution that will help contact public and private initiatives. That's the step we're taking now to accelerate even further what we have done so far in Mato Grosso. And this afternoon, we're going to be conducting another webinar to talk about the advances that we made. Thank you very much, Bettina, and thanks to Marfrig.
Thank you, Fernando. It really is a challenge, and so that public policy and or business initiatives can be successful, it is key to have the support and engagement of those in the field, so farmers and cattle raisers. And now we have Fernanda. As I told you, Fernanda is an animal scientist, she is a university professor and a cattle raiser. So she knows that in practice sometimes theory changes. Fernanda, could you share your experience with us in conservation projects, please? Yes, hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation, everyone at Marfrig, and thanks for remembering me. As a cattle raiser, just like Pedro said, we do have a lot of challenges to contend with, but we need to understand where they come from. It's time for all of us cattle raisers to get together through initiatives such as this and realize that it's time for cattle production to change, and that change has to be permanent. We need to change the status quo, not have one-off changes. We need to change the way we see cattle raising. We need to change the way we see the environment, how everything fits together. So if we want to change that way of seeing things, the first thing we need to bear in mind is what consumers are telling us. Consumers have been letting us know that they want change, that they want to stop eating beef. Some of them have already stopped. Some of them are stopping. We need to respect that. But consumers are not saying, I want to stop eating altogether. They're saying, I want to eat something different. I want to understand what your production process is like. It started off as a whisper. Now it's becoming louder. I only hope that we don't wait until they're shouting, because that will be too late. For the biggest challenge for us cattle raisers now is to do more with less. And in order to do that, we need technology. They are available, but in order to be able to implement them more quickly at the farms, we need resources, and those are not easy to get. And we need resources that help us understand that change in mindset, resources that have different interest rates for those who have less of a carbon footprint, or a change in dates. I forget what it's called. You know, the date we start paying a bit more if we're investing in generating sustainable energy, because that return on investment takes a little bit longer. So those are the challenges. We know what we need. We need to engage everyone, the industry, credit providers, policies, the regulatory agency, traceability. We need to show consumers that we want to change. We need public relations, we need marketing. We all know that, it's already been said, but there are some items missing. We need to show cattle raisers what sustainable practices are all about, how they can implement them at their farms. Sometimes I talk to cattle raisers and they say, I don't know what you mean. Do I need to have solar panels? No, there are many other things that can be done. We can have integrated operations, we can make use of renewable energy. There are many kinds of sustainable practices, so things need to become a little clearer to cattle raisers, so they know what they can implement now, what they can implement in 5 years' time and in 10 years' time, so that they can have a plan and turn their production system into a sustainable production system. So we need to do that. We need to foster science, because science expands our horizons and shows us where to invest so as not to get things wrong. And the third thing, I believe, is to encourage young people. We are the seeds. Decisions we make in these events are like seeds. But those seeds will be sown by our future employees, our future managers, future farm owners. They're the ones who need to understand these things. And we need to encourage them to understand these new production systems. And I like saying that because I don't see a lot being done with young people. As for my case, you asked me to talk about that. We decided a few years ago to change. We only raised cattle at our farm in Mato Grosso do Sul. I'm not saying that we couldn't have sustainable practices, but we wanted to have an integrated production system. So we decided to change. It took us 2 years to find affordable land that would suit what we wanted to do. So now we are in Lucas de Rio Verde, and it took us 2 years to do that. So that gives you some idea of how long it takes. And now our program to recover degraded areas, abandoned areas, and to legalize, to make everything official, will take 5 years. We're in the third year of making everything official, so we're in the third year. We still have 2 years ahead of us before we achieve our objective to recover all those areas. And next year, we'll start implementing our integrated system. So our project will take 5 years all in all. So we'll be investing for 5 years. We're also investing in renewable energy, solar energy, hydropower, and it will take us 2 years to conclude the implementation of those projects. So, as you can see, all of that takes a long time. And we, as cattle raisers, want to be recognized for implementing those changes, for trying to do things differently. So we're talking about 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, but encouraging young people should be consistent. And we need to understand that what we're getting now should last forever. So my challenge to you is we need to conserve while at the same time meeting human needs, the current generation needs and future generation needs. So we also need to bear that in mind. So as a cattle raiser, my question to you is, where do we want to go? If you know where you want to go, where you want to get to, look for partnerships with people who will add to your effort of sustainable production. We don't want to be the sitting target in Brazilian agriculture. So thank you for the invitation. It's wonderful to take part in such an event and to be in contact with important people such as yourselves. Thank you. Thank you, Fernanda. Thanks for your words. It's amazing how many wonderful things you've been doing. And it's also amazing to see everything that still needs to be done, all the challenges you've mentioned that still need to be overcome. Paulo Pianez will be talking about that in a minute, but before that we have Gonzalo. Gonzalo Munoz from Chile. He's a UN champion and a high-level climate action agent. Welcome, Munoz. How can we connect production to conservation to climate change? How is cattle raising associated to climate issues? Are we ready to discuss that at the next COP, which will take place in November? How will the Brazilian delegation, how is it discussing it internally, and how will it discuss it with everyone? Good morning, Bettina. Thank you very much. First of all, congratulations to Marfrig for this initiative. I will answer your question by saying we will not be able to solve climate change problems without a fully aligned agricultural and food industry. I'm also speaking as a farmer. I have a winery here in Chile. I come from an agricultural background, and we've been doing the same thing for decades. So we need to change so we can become part of the climate change solution. That is the opportunity that lies ahead of us. But if we look at that opportunity in the context of 2021, it's an even bigger challenge. Not only do we have COP25, we have a diversity COP, we have a summit, a UN food summit. So we have to make the most of this year to position ourselves with our climate ambition, our commitment, and the main thing in the Marfrig Verde plan is that it's based on science. It follows the highest standards of robust and strict science, independent science, and it is in line with the global objective of not allowing temperatures to go any further up than 1.5 degrees. Any company, Marfrig or any others, are not going to reinvent the wheel, but we need to be in line with what science tells us. And that has to do with that 1.5 degree temperature increase and becoming carbon neutral before 2050, reducing our emissions by at least 45% before 2030. All of the science-based target initiative, CDP, the basis for the Marfrig plan is something that has to be taken into consideration. I'm a high-level champion for COP25. Nigel Topping is a high-level champion for COP26. We're creating that agenda. We've been doing that together for over a year now, and we want to understand and take a deep dive into the scientific elements of everything Marfrig has been doing, because it's through that kind of commitment, through that kind of metric, that this plan will provide support to a global trend that both of us as high-level champions are driving and pushing as a priority. The plan also points to two main areas of the chain which have the biggest GHG reduction potential. On the one hand, the impact on biomes. So the rationale is to focus our influence capacity on nature-based solutions. And on the other hand, as Fernanda mentioned, the importance to replace the energy mix. That has to be done through a partnership with agencies such as Embrapa that sponsor carbon neutral initiatives. That's key. Also working with a 10-year horizon, thinking about the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, with clear objectives, institutional partnerships, focusing on both producers and suppliers. That is key for Marfrig to achieve the program goals, because it will need a supply chain that operates based on the same rationale. We know that 2030 will be a key date in the exponential reduction of reductions if we want to achieve that 1.5 degree goal. It's clear that this is a very complex sector, and I'm speaking here as a producer, not only in Brazil, but everywhere Marfrig is present. Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, we know that this industry is criticized, and it comes from qualified sources. The commitment with inclusion, transparency, full traceability, and always science-based, peer-reviewed, based, validated by independent third parties. Companies are submitting to that voluntarily, and it should be seen as an act of good faith. So that will lead to increasing trust and showing that it is possible to change things, even under such criticism, as is the case of cattle raising in Brazil. So that's the challenge, and that's why we need to work together through public-private partnerships. That is the essence of the campaign that we are leading. There's also a climate change coalition platform. We've just launched an initiative in Brazil, and that is the basis for the results we want to show at COP26 and beyond. The main Brazilian markets, as we know, are coming into line with that perspective, China has committed until 2060. The US has put the future of the Amazon as a conditioning agency, a conditioning fact, and now on the 22nd of April, we should be getting another sign from the US in that direction. And Europe has been leading the net zero initiative for a long time. So thank you very much for the invitation to be here today. Once again, congratulations to Marfrig for their leadership and for being in line with science. And I want to invite Marfrig to join. When I say Marfrig, I mean their whole supply chain. So Fernanda, that includes you too. Join the Race to Zero through a partner. It can be led by the Global Pact, or if you can commit before that. Once again, thank you. I'm hugely interested in today's agenda and looking forward to Glasgow at COP26 and to be able to show how the agro and the food industry and the cattle raising industry in Brazil can do and contribute to achieving the Paris Agreement results and solve this climate crisis. Thank you. Thank you, Munhoz, and congratulations in pushing this agenda forward globally. And now, Paulo Pianez, who is the Marfrig's Sustainability Director, is going to tell us a little bit about what's been happening since the Verdemize program was launched, how it's progressed, its main results, next steps. Over to you, Paulo. Thank you, Bettina. And thanks everyone for joining us. As we've heard before, this journey requires a joint effort. The public sector, our industry, academia, coalitions, and there's no doubt that the Verdemize program, which was launched last year, focuses on the principle of partnerships, of engagement, and making sure that all links in the chain can make a relevant contribution when it comes to the challenges that lie ahead. Is my presentation up already?
I'd like to say that the Marfrig Verdemize initiative was developed between Marfrig and the public and private initiative IDH, that has been a Marfrig partner for quite some time, bringing knowledge, expertise, and effort so that this agenda to reconcile production and conservation can be robust, close to those that can actually make a difference. Marfrig has been working on that sustainability agenda to generate a positive impact for quite some time. So much so that among our strategic pillars we have sustainability, and it has been one of the key topics that guide our governance. To give you an idea on the governance standpoint, we have a sustainability committee that meets monthly, and all those topics are taken to that committee. As members, we have the CEO, Miguel Goularte, the controller, our chairman of the board, Marcos Molina, and also two board members, Roberto Vacchi, a board member coordinating that committee, along with Marcelo Furtado and Daniela Mariuso, our long-term partner, because she leads IDH in the provides more robustness to our sustainability model that involves 6 principles. I'm not going to go through them, but everything related to ESG from a governance standpoint is also addressed in that platform that are in line with the challenges related to climate problems and urgency in conservation. In the last 10 years, Marfrig has been doing a lot, as I said. That began even before 2009, but our landmark was 2009. It evolved along the last decade, and then in 2020 we can say that a lot was done. We had the launch of low carbon beef. The first one was a neutral carbon beef, the low carbon meat that will be launched this year. Technologies introduced to do geo-monitoring in the supply chain back in 2010. Partnerships with our producers through Marfrig Club launched in 2012, whose main objective is to be closer to the farmers, to share knowledge, understand their needs, and this allowed us to come to the Marfrig Verdemize program. In 2020, we increased our effort because in 2019, along with IDH, we signed an MOU that served as a basis to the Verdemize program. That program was announced in July last year, but it comes along with many other things we've been doing at the same time. For instance, promotion of green products, like a green CPR, low carbon products, as I mentioned. Tools to understand cattle production in Brazil and to promote risk mitigation. And Marfrig has a substantial recognition in the market at a fair trade. We are now producing organic meat according to the USDA parameters. So a lot has been done. But we believe we must go further, and that's not enough. There are so many challenges that must be addressed. And for that to be addressed, we must review our commitment and reinforce our commitment. And last year, we redirected our focus using the state of Mato Grosso as a reference through their PCI program. And it's not by chance that IDH is a partner with Mato Grosso, creating the PCI strategy that has become an institute. As we see the partnership with Marfrig, the importance of Mato Grosso to us, obviously that will be extended to other states, but we were inspired by the public policies that were launched in 2015. So what is the Marfrig commitment? Our number one driver is a rupture with an existing paradigm in the last 10 years, the paradigm of exclusion. In our supply chains, we would say, well, you can, the other one can't. And that doesn't make any sense, because as you exclude certain people, you don't provide the necessary support, you don't understand the context to maintain those producers in our supply chain. Reasons that would exclude them from the supply chain. Inclusion is the starting point of our initiative. And if inclusion is a starting point, we must understand the context in which those producers are working. What are their needs? By doing that, we can engage them, and we try and identify them in our supply chain. Therefore, we have traceability. To make it happen, for that inclusion to happen, we need three pillars, namely financial mechanisms. As Fernanda reminded us, we must foster the Brazilian banking market to transform certain products available to producers. Some producers are unable to access some types of credit in order for them to transform their productions because sometimes they do not meet all the requirements. So we must review the credit structure that we have for production in Brazil. We must understand the context, especially of small producers involved in cow-calf operations. And they are the ones that need the resources the most in order to work according to environmental and land use legislations. This will allow them to become more sustainable. Once that is done, we also need technology. Basically, we need technology. For producers to become more productive and profitable and sustainable, they require technical assistance. They need to intensify their productions. They must better manage their pasture land. They must improve the quality of their cattle through breeding. They must learn how to do integration between livestock and other crops, having other sources of income. Once that technical assistance is available as well as financial resources, we can monitor the whole supply chain. We can trace them. Not trace the suppliers. We should allow producers to show the world what they are doing, because we need to meet the demands of foreign consumers, because all consumers will end up having the same requirements. We must meet the demands of investors and also the demands of society at large. So PCI was developed along with IDH, and it goes pretty much along those lines, including small holders being close to them and engage them. And to engage them, resources are key. Technification is key. Pretty soon we will have the complete traceability of the animal and of the beef that we buy on the supermarket shelves. What is the Marfrig Verdemize program? In practice, as I said, is heavily focused on financial mechanisms and technical assistance, but there are many initiatives involved. And these initiatives are not necessarily sequential. They were developed as a mosaic because they are all interconnected. They happen simultaneously. And they address all the points that are raised involving those three pillars: financial resources, technification, and monitoring, involving both direct and indirect suppliers and the sector as a whole. All the stakeholders in the supply chain, like bankers, investors, the academia, research institutes like the PCI Institute, governments. So it's a very complex effort involving a significant number of initiatives that must be implemented to make it all happen. Let me just give you a few examples. The development of monitoring systems, integration system, the re-inclusion of suppliers, technical assistance programs, integration programs, crop and livestock integration. So a number of elements that we have been developing since the program was launched. And it's been built in a partnership with IDH. We've made quite some progress since it was launched. On the next screen, you'll be able to see that we've had almost 10 initiatives. Some were scheduled for late last year, but we were able to advance them. The introduction of carbon neutral beef. This is a scientific and measurable protocol that involves third-party certification, and we can prove through a measurement to what extent we can call that beef carbon neutral. This program will be expanded. Pretty soon, the neutral carbon beef will have a brother called low carbon beef that will be launched in the second half of the year, pretty much in line with the need of having innovation whenever we talk about a low carbon economy. Let's go back to the previous screen, please. The unified protocol for cattle purchase, it was put into practice in July last year. The conclusion of the risk mitigation map, monitoring tools that I will discuss later, the CAF programs in a partnership with IDH, and I had the pleasure of participating in it when I was working for another company, and that was launched in 2018. Actually, it is a lab that is quite important. It involves over 400 producers, and later on we will gain even more scale. But everything I'm saying is being implemented, so we learn, adjust, and this is a program that can be extended to in a larger scale. So the Sustainable CAF program has been a place for us to test our ideas. And the recovery program and geomonitoring in the Cerrados, because the Cerrados are a very important biome, and Marfrig has adapted all its systems so that, pretty similar to what we do in the Amazon region, we can monitor the Cerrados. Next. As I was talking about the CAF monitoring program in a partnership with IDH, that program is extremely important. Marfrig is formally part of that program. We just signed an MOU to formally join the program because we understand that this is where most initiatives and experiences will be as the Marfrig Verdemize program gains scale. It's a program that supports small holders, small producers can participate. We want these programs to be used in practice. Now, for that to happen, obviously, Marfrig will invest resources. We want to give this program more scale, and we want all animals being in the program being slaughtered at Marfrig. Something else that we did that was quite innovative is a risk map. What is a risk mitigation map? Next screen, please. The risk mitigation map was developed in a partnership with Agroecony. And this is important in any plan. It's based on science, on formal data, for us to understand the context. And this risk map is innovative. We use what is available today, like the deforestation maps, the presence of native vegetation, social indication, pasture maps. They are already there. We are just interconnecting, we are overlapping those maps in such a way that it allows us to identify where the bulk of cattle raising takes place. Using an algorithm developed by agroecony, we were able to identify, especially in the Amazon and the Cerrado biomes, where we have cow-calf and finishing operations. And this is also a jurisdictional approach because we can identify the areas of risk. When I'm able to place our direct suppliers in that map, we can prioritize all activities involved in the Verdemize program. That will allow us to be more assertive, and we can accelerate the whole program. And it's a perfect combination with our calf program. I know where the problems are, I know where I need to act, and the producers must be closer to. Through what's been done in the calf program, if we identify any issue that needs to be solved with this map, we will be able to do it. So understanding the context is extremely important in order to face the challenges that we are faced with, but we believe it is doable and we are doing it. Next. We redesigned a program that has been around since 2012. It was called Marfrig Club, and it was focused on providing knowledge and sharing knowledge with the farmers, with the producers. But now it gains a new status. I wouldn't call it a hospital, but a support center for Marfrig to be close and connected to producers. We will have professionals at our plants in the regions where the producers are working. In a very practical manner, we will be able to take this information and these discussions to the producers, having field days, sharing information, listening to farmers. Obviously, we listen to them already, but this is an initiative focused on reconciling conservation, production, and inclusion. So the Marfrig Club will be a direct connection with producers to implement our programs. We have a group of experts and technicians that are already in place in each of our units in order to make that connection and make things happen in practice.
Another important point is the third pillar of monitoring and traceability. So how is that going to work? What are we doing in practice? Next slide, please. For that to happen, we need technology. We cannot do without technology. Technology and science are the two operative words here at Marfrig. Everything we've been doing has to be science-based, has to use technology, and it all has to fit into a closer relationship with the different links in the chain and the knowledge base of our direct supplier. For the Amazon, we have 100% of the information because we monitor them 100%. And we're doing the same thing for the Cerrado. So when we put those producers in the risk mitigation map, we can see the areas where will have to focus more. These are the priority areas. And we do the same when we look at the number of farms and herds. That gives us the riskier areas. Once we've identified the riskier areas, then we have a different tool that's been developed in partnership with the CNPq-DO, the partnership with DNC and Amigos da Terra, which is the connector system, which is a blockchain technology that allows cattle raisers to take all the information to the farm. That's how we're engaging and including cattle raisers. So the data will be entered by cattle raisers, monitored by Marfrig, and when they register, they can also identify their suppliers, who are Marfrig's indirect suppliers, and that will happen throughout the chain. So once the cattle raiser has done that, and they realize that Marfrig is providing them with support, they will grant access to that list. So how can we make sure that that is the full list? That's a different stage of the process, which is to validate that list with CNA, because CNA has all the connections that happen through the different cattle raising stages. So based on that validation, we'll have the full list of suppliers, which includes Marfrig's direct and indirect suppliers. Once that's done, we'll use two other technology platforms which are part of the same model. I know it's complex, but complex problems require complex solutions. So there are two other embedded solutions. A technology developed by Geoflorestas, which conducts an environmental assessment, and a different technology developed by a company called Brand AG, which is a big database that provides information about that specific cattle raiser. So that will allow us to understand what their needs are. And once that's done, we'll know if that cattle raiser is okay. They are a Marfrig cattle raiser. They have to have higher yields, be more profitable, and be more sustainable. And if there are any problems, then Marfrig Verdemize will deal with that. It will then have become a link with cattle raisers and will allow us to address any potential issues. So everything we're doing is being tested and is up and running in our CAF programs. You know, the high-tech adoption, all these improvements, all of these things have been tested for over 2 years, so they're very robust. Next, please. And then there's something completely new at Marfrig and in this industry. Through that engagement and through this closer relationship with all cattle raisers, we've been able to identify 62% of our direct and indirect producers. That is unprecedented. Our goal is to identify 100% of them by 2025. But right now, on the 24th of March, 2021, we've already identified 62% of them. And everything we've done so far is part of this whole process I've just shown you. All the monitoring and tracing tools. In the Cerrado region, that number is up to 47%. Just to remind you, our target was 2030, but we're already up to nearly 50%. So that goes to show that what Marfrig has been doing, because it is science-based, because it uses robust technology, and through programs that have been showing us the way, such as our CAF program, we know that we're on the right track, and we can see that based on the results we've got so far. So that's a milestone, and it shows us that it is possible to make sure that cattle raisers are part of our chain, that they are included and no longer excluded, and it's all possible. Next, please. So once again, just reiterating Marfrig's assumption, which is inclusion and support to cattle raisers so that they can be more profitable and more sustainable. But this also includes a challenge. These exclusion criteria, when you have different criteria along our cattle raising supply chain, we need to go over them again because there are still paradigms to be overcome. And let me share an example from the banking sector. The banking industry has been making a great deal of effort, a pro-Amazon conservation, but what needs to be taken to cattle raisers, as Fernanda said, challenges are huge, and she knows what she's doing, but think of a cattle raiser in some remote area in Rondônia, for instance. Cattle raisers who want to do it right, they need the resources, but often they can't have access to them. So we need to rethink how these resources are being granted. If we do not want any deforestation, cannot that be a collateral to subsidize an operation with these banks? Banks that are now putting a great deal of effort into this conservation agenda. So I invite you and encourage you to address these issues more directly, considering the needs of cattle raisers at the end of the spectrum. And the same goes for investors. When you talk about investors, we need to have new mechanisms, new funds with these investors, such as And Green, which is a recent operation. It's part of the Verdemize program scope. And it's an on-site validation program to provide Marfrig with that certification, and it provides us with access to a great deal more resources. And investors play a key role there, well beyond saying, I don't invest in this chain in Brazil because of such and such a problem. How about looking at it differently? I do invest in Brazil, and I am providing formal support through different financial options, choices, so that we can address challenges. At the end, we think that's much more creative, much more effective, and everything that's been tried in the past 10 years and hasn't been achieved might be achieved in the next 10 years. So this is my invitation to you, as well as to all other chains in the chain, in this industry, the public sector, such as the state of Mato Grosso has been doing through its public policies, through inspection, through the right use of degraded areas. So there are many things that require measures throughout the cattle raising supply chain. We at Marfrig need it, and we will do it because we are willing to go through that transformation. And last but not least, another important point that has to do with what Gonzalo just said. If you can turn over to the next slide, please. It's the sense of urgency when it comes to the climate issue. It has to do with everything we've just talked about within the scope of the Verdemize program, everything that needs to happen in the field. We know that a great deal of emissions in Brazil have to do with land use. So among all the different initiatives that are required, everything we're addressing through the Marfrig Verdemize program is connected to the goals that we have established for the reduction of greenhouse gases. Marfrig has been working on a scientific methodology based on the science-based targets. We've conducted a review over the past 8 months. We went through many different calculations considering cattle raising variables and Marfrig specific variables so that we could come up with goals and an execution plan to achieve those goals, including Scope 1 and Scope 2. Scope 1 has to do with Marfrig's operation, and Scope 2 has to do with energy, renewable energy. 80% of Brazil's energy mix in Brazil comes from renewable sources. So we've been working hard to increase that, both in the US and in our South American operations. And this goal is for Marfrig Corporation as a whole. It is 43% by 2035, using 2019 as a basis. But we've realized that we can reach that target before then. Climate change is an urgent matter, and it requires us to be more effective, always science-based and based on public commitment and a plan. The same applies to Scope 3. Scope 3 includes indirect emissions, both upstream and downstream, so that includes logistics, field emissions through land use by those who supply anything to Marfrig, logistic emissions. So our goal is 35% reduction by 2035. And of course, we hope to be net zero. That is our ambition. There's no doubt about it. We've been working on a very robust plan so that we can have a goal. But we've also realized that net zero can be achieved between 2035 and 2040. So what we had thought would happen by 2050 will be brought forward through concrete action, concrete variables, a clear plan, and that can be monitored year on year because it's part of our commitment with science-based targets and a commitment with the CDP. So society as a whole will be able to monitor that. And we believe that these reduction goals will be even more aggressive. And we're absolutely certain that Marfrig will be net zero between 2035 and 2040. So bringing that target forward due to this urgent matter, but it will all be science-based. We'll have clear action plans to achieve that, and always committing to global entities that show that publicly to society. So Marfrig is leading the ESG agenda, and we're not the ones saying that. Marfrig has the best ratings according to an English institution that assesses the top 60 companies around the world in animal protein. We're 4th. In animal welfare, we're going to tier 2. And in CDP, we are the best assessed according to the 3 key panels: forest, water, and climate change. Marfrig was listed at EASY, our local stock exchange index, and the ECO2, the carbon efficient index, also from the local stock exchange. And everything to do with climate change and emissions is always science-based target oriented, because science is key. And this agenda is connected to cattle raisers because they are the key link in our business. They are Marfrig's reason for being because they are the ones who supply us with our raw materials. So this engagement policy, this close relationship providing support, understanding them is what has been making us get this far and what will continue to make us go far. That's it from me. Thank you all for joining us, and my special thanks to the government of Mato Grosso for taking part of this session, IDH, our partners in conceiving this program, and over to you, Bettina. Thank you. Thank you, Paulo, for all the explanations, and now I'll turn it over to the governor of Mato Grosso, Mr. Mauro Mendes, to talk about their zero tolerance to deforestation. It's a state policy, and they've recently announced that they'll be investing 73 million reais in fighting deforestation and forest fires in 2021. That is the most ever invested for that purpose in the state. Welcome, Governor. Thank you, Bettina. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the Marfrig team, and good morning. To talk about the environment amidst a pandemic is quite a thorny subject, because it's been thorny to go through this moment that Brazil, the world, and the state of Mato Grosso have been going through. Every day we're losing thousands of lives to the pandemic, but the environment is a crucial matter. There will be life after the pandemic, millions of lives, and we need to take care of them. So we're doing our absolute best to help people, to save lives, and millions of people will survive. So it's very important to be here with you right now, and the government and companies are aware of their economic and social roles and the impact they have on survival, the relationships with markets, consumers. They know that they need to be more proactive when it comes to the environment. The state of Mato Grosso, I've been the governor of the state for over 2 years, and it's become clear to me how important this topic is and that it should be a priority in our agenda. So my priority has been for the state to organize as a regulatory and inspection agent so that it can fulfill its role in managing collective interests and the environmental issue here in the state. There are many policies concerning environmental preservation. They're very clear, they're very well defined, they comply with the legislation. We all know that Brazil has one of the strictest legislations when it comes to the environment. It's the Brazilian Forestry Code. However, there's no point in having strong legislation if the legislation is not complied with. Either we comply with the legislation or we're moving to a third-class society. Here in Brazil, there are thousands of laws, obsolete laws, up-to-date laws, and people think that things can be solved by passing different laws. Every day I say, they come up with laws for everything. Federal laws, laws to say the obvious. So laws are not the way forward. But the Brazilian Forestry Code is our legal framework for environmental initiatives.
We respect the legislation. We may disagree and even go to the Congress to hold a democratic debate to change those laws. But meanwhile, we must abide by them, and that's what we must do in Mato Grosso. If we take the CAR seriously, we must take the measures to make it evolve. When I became governor in 2019, Mato Grosso had analyzed a little over 2,000 CARs. And we had another 60,000 waiting. If we do the math, 60,000 divided by 2,000, it would take us 30 years to analyze what was there, not to mention the new ones. So we needed to change that dramatically. We put together a task force, we hired people, and today the state of Mato Grosso analyzes about 5,000 records a month, whereas in 2018 only 20,000 were analyzed a year. The CAR, that record is important because it allows us to eliminate irregularities. With that record, we have a better control of our territory. We implemented a few technologies to fight illegal deforestation, allowing us to detect in 24 hours any illegal major or deforestation greater than 1 hectare. And we can act before it blows out of proportion. And we don't want to fine people because they deforested 1,000 hectares illegally. And a very high fine might not even allow people to pay for it, or even the reimbursement of the state, not only financially for the damage caused, but for the environmental asset that is so important in our relations. So the state of Mato Grosso, my friends, and that's what I wanted to tell everyone, we are very clear that the environmental policy has to be taken seriously. From the environmental standpoint or from the legal standpoint, well, the environment is just not the preservation of forests or a standing tree. The environment is taking care of our rivers, of so many aspects that are equally important. I've said this a few times. It's easy for people in urban centers to point fingers at Mato Grosso or the Amazon region saying that wrong things are being done here, while the Tietê River in São Paulo still is so polluted in the largest financial center in the country. So in this corner of the world, as a governor, we will do our utmost to comply with the legislation. If the legislation allows anybody to deforest 65% in the Cerrado and deforest 20% of the forest, we will guarantee that right. But if you don't have that right, don't do it. Last year, we issued the equivalent of 1 billion reals in fines, and I told people, take us seriously. Don't assume that these fines will expire in the state of Mato Grosso. And this is the message I wanted to convey. We will apply the legislation correctly. We will work so that the state is efficient in fulfilling its role. We understand the importance of preservation, not only from this environmental standpoint, but because of markets as well. But the environment is such a major asset. We have to better explore that asset. And to do that and to preserve that asset, we must implement other policies, because today at state level, the biggest pressure behind deforestation takes place among smallholders, people who risk it all because they stand very little to lose. Today, people don't do it because they have a lot to lose, especially large farmers. That's why inclusion in the PCI strategy is very important. It's the duty of the state, of the public authority, and of the markets to create alternatives for those people. We are working on that. We are developing techniques and technologies, developing policies for smallholders to have an alternative to grow and survive and improve their standard of living without putting pressure on deforestation. A classical example, if you have 10 milk cows and sometimes you don't have the necessary income, so they need to deforest to expand their area to raise 30 head of cattle. The government is betting on the breeding of our herd. We are donating semen to improve the herds. We are working with technology in coffee, in cocoa, so that even in a small area, 3 to 4 hectares, smallholders can have income enough without needing to deforest any area. So that's the message I wanted to convey to you, talking to this company that is so important in our state because they are in the beef supply chain. Mato Grosso has the largest bovine herd in the country. We have the potential to keep growing, although there is a movement towards turning pasture into crop production. We will continue growing in this area and we will remain an important player as a producer of protein. We must be respected for our ability to produce food, and we can't be considered a villain. If there are mistakes, let us correct them. If there are people doing the wrong thing, we will punish them. But we need partners to promote growth in every supply chain, and we cannot leave smallholders aside. We need to provide them with alternatives. Thank you very much, and congratulations to Marfrig for this important initiative, such an important company in Brazil, very relevant in the state of Mato Grosso. Thank you, Governor. Good luck. And to close this webinar, we will listen to Marcos Molina, the chairman of the board at Marfrig, for his final thoughts. Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to see how our supply chain is involved and committed with sustainability. In the history of Marfrig, social and environmental issues have always been present. Our commitment goes way beyond risk mitigation. Over the last few years, we worked to expand positive impact, and by doing that, we managed to contribute to social and economic development and the maintenance and recovery of biodiversity in the areas where we operate. This position was never a choice to us. We always believed that the world would head towards that, towards valuing sustainability and companies who are truly sustainable. That truly happened. In our sector, more than ever, environmental responsibility became an obligation. Only truly sustainable companies that produce and at the same time respect the planet and make the best use of natural resources will be relevant in the future. And only by doing that will we obtain the respect and the support of customers, consumers, employees, and the financial market. Marfrig truly wants to be part of that group, followed by all its suppliers. That's why we reaffirm our pact with inclusion and partnership with the producers, being transparent with society, having traceability in our supply chain, preserving our biomes. We believe that the engagement of all links in our supply chain is vital in order to have faster activities, achieving the best results for everyone involved. We wanted to include the whole supply chain and guarantee benefits to everyone. That's why the Marfrig Verdemize program was developed, having partnership, support, and engagement as the best means to achieve our objectives. In our plan, we encourage the engagement of producers through innovative mechanisms and through technology. We want to give them access to financial resources. And the more committed all stakeholders are, the faster we will achieve our targets with true benefits to companies, communities, the environment, and Brazil. As you saw in 2020, Marfrig and its suppliers made a lot of progress. We received important recognitions showing we are on the right path. We're also very pleased, but we know that there is still a lot to be done. This year, we continue counting on the partnership with producers. We will continue focusing on the inclusion of indirect suppliers to reinforce and strengthen our commitment with sustainable production. Brazilian cattle production has a huge potential to be recognized as highly productive, sustainable, low carbon, and cattle raising that will be the example of sustainability and positive results across the globe. I want to thank everyone participating in the event today. Once again, thank you all very much. Thank you, Molina, and I would like to thank everyone who spent this hour and a half with us learning a little more about the Marfrig Verdemize program, because to know where the cattle came from in Brazil is important, because that allows buyers to be more certain of where their products come from. And that places Marfrig as at an outstanding position. Congratulations to Marfrig. I want to thank everyone, our participants, and the answers to the questions you sent through our chat will be available on the Marfrig website. Have a pleasant day. Would you pass me the salt?